Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on the Fair Compare Weekly Video Podcast number 58. My name is Rick Sini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FairCompare.com.
And I'm Ann McDermott. I'm the editor of FairCompare.com, and we are going to talk today about Thanksgiving. And Rick, you did a pretty fascinating analysis comparing fares from 2015 to 2016. We're also going to talk about stuff your pilot wishes you would not do. But and also we've got an Adventurist, we got a question, we got everything. But boy, let's get to that Thanksgiving right now.
Yeah, no, I'd love to take the complete credit. We have a couple data scientists here that actually probably did all the work. I'll take all the credit though. But essentially what we did is we studied several million different pairs for Thanksgiving. And what we did is we wanted to see what it looked like year over year for cities during Thanksgiving, looking at all the most popular days. We did a study previously to show which days were the most expensive and which ones weren't. And as usual, Anne, as we find out in all these different studies that we do, there's been some winning cities and some losing cities. And as it turns out, you have a few cities like Houston and Philadelphia. By the way, those were quote unquote hub cities of airlines that no longer exist anymore.
Yeah.
That had sort of the worst of it. And then in some cases, there was hub cities that you wouldn't think necessarily, like Minneapolis, that actually was extremely cheap as well. So a loss also included Chicago and some other cities as well. Boston, I think, was in that category as well. So essentially what we found is you have some, this is the one thing I hate about when averages are, we could have said in the study that the price hasn't changed much, or we could actually dive in a little bit deeper and see which cities actually had more or less in this particular case. And I think once you start diving in a little deeper, I'm less inclined to worry about averages. I'm not a huge fan, as we've known, as we stated in the podcast before, of averages. I always guess they ask, well, what's the average airfare in the United States? Oh, it's $488. Well, I fly from Dallas to Houston. Is that what I'm going to pay? No, it means nothing. It only means stuff for trending. So these percentage changes are pretty interesting. And I noticed that Orlando was basically flat year over year. Dallas was up a little bit. So come check out the article. I think we probably have, 20, 25 cities or so. So hopefully your city is included in what we're showing for the data.
And we've got a handy chart that you can look at, and it's just a fascinating read that, even averages, maybe what you pay isn't going to come down 15% like Minneapolis, but, it shows it's trending down, and that's something.
That's a good thing. Well, the thing that I would note for everybody that's out there, when your city like Boston is down 9%, just remember that last year it was up dramatically.
Yeah.
So this is only a year over year study. It's not a 5-year study or a 10-year study. So, and again, those are a little more complicated because you have crazy events like the fuel crisis in 2008 and the recession of 2009 and 2010. So good news in general, prices are down. And by the way, Anne, we've seen even the airlines. The first time, I haven't seen this in a long time. I was reading through some of the analysts' info and some of the calls from airlines. They were actually saying that they think prices are going to be down to Europe. So that's another thing we should chat about in our next podcast. When airlines come out and say they think prices are going to be lower and they're actually letting investors know that, they're going to be lower.
One more Thanksgiving note. I just posted just a few minutes ago a Thanksgiving Day sale from Southwest. Now, and some of the prices are remarkable. There are a couple of $39 one-way prices, but I do notice that the two most expensive days to fly, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and the Sunday after, which you have pointed out again and again, those are not included in the sale.
Yeah, and the thing is that, Southwest has sales all the time and they have cheaper fares in some cases. So this is more like saying I have a sale on my current prices to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Because they've had sort of ongoing, sort of what I would call fall winter sales going off and on, to and fro. And essentially they blacked out things like Friday and Sunday. In this case, they're going to black out the Wednesday before and the Sunday after, for example. So this is sort of an extension of the fall winter sales, as long as you're not traveling traveling exactly on the days around Thanksgiving. So, and most people actually don't stay an entire week for Thanksgiving. It's unusual for people to do that. But if you can take advantage, there. I know everybody loves to procrastinate. You're going to outfox the airlines, but once you're inside at 30 days before departure, which we're right on that cusp right now, I think we actually crossed over, you're playing right into the airline's hands. So get out there and shop as quick as you can.
Now, I know in the course of your travels over the years, you have talked to pilots a time or
many
two.
of them, yeah. And they've talked to me, not coincidentally in some cases. Some they're not overly talkative, but many of them are. And I noticed, with that, I thought it would be kind of cool to actually compile a top 5 list of what pilots don't want you to be doing. And I noticed when you were helping me out with this, the number one thing that I think that I've heard back and a lot of feedback from pilots is they just don't want people to be roaming around the cabin. Turbulence can occur. This sort of follows on again with also keeping your seatbelt buckled as well.
Right.
All sorts of bad things can happen when you're roaming around or you don't have your seatbelt. I know many times you hear the dinging sound and it says that you don't have to have your seatbelt on. I'm so used to having a seatbelt on in a car. It doesn't bother me to have the seatbelt on. And I've been in some flights where it's been extremely turbulent. I was pretty darn happy to have that seatbelt on.
Well, and they've got what's called clear air turbulence, and that can come out of nowhere on a bright sunny day. And pilots,
happens all the time.
Can't be detected by most radar and stuff, because pilots normally will fly around storms. They'll add time to a flight if they have to, just to avoid that. But some of this stuff you can't avoid. And if you're just sitting there, you could be hurt. So
And there's places, for example, I've been to like Las Vegas area, Tahoe area, Reno area, where you're going to get bounced around no matter what. So keeping that on is a good idea. I think, it goes without saying that the crew is not somebody you want to mess with. And I think this sort of goes with the other sort of paired up with don't overindulge in alcohol. So those typically tend to be sort of hand in hand in some cases. And so clearly, most people don't realize how well-trained flight attendants are. I mean, I don't know if I've ever told this story before, but one of my wife's good friends is a flight attendant. We were actually playing tennis one day. She actually saved a man on the tennis court that had a heart attack.
Wow.
And she immediately provided the CPR, they had the machine inside the tennis shop where they actually had the zapper machine. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. Clearly I'm not a doctor.
Zapper machine.
I guess it's not the defibrillator. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, but she had that on. And of course, we were at a place where there was a golf course as well. So they tried to find a doctor on the golf course and it took him 30 minutes to get there. By that time, the fire department was already there with the EMTs, but essentially saved his life. So look, they're well trained. They know what they're doing. They know how to handle situations. If you saw, how they handled the Hudson situation, I know I recently saw Sully, and it was just a reminder of how good they are at doing their job. So don't mess with them.
Yes, and if you do mess with them, we have the recent example of the American Airlines pilot who came out of the cockpit and was not happy when this guy was allegedly, drunkenly arguing with a flight attendant, and he shoved her, and the pilot put that guy down on the ground in the plane.
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly making a pilot get out of the cockpit is going to typically mean that flight is going to be diverted somewhere, right? So if they actually have to come out of the cockpit, then that means everybody on the plane is not going to get to where they need to be. The pilot's not going to get where they be. The flight attendants aren't going to get where they be. It's just not something you want to do. And clearly, we've seen what's happened with flights being completely full. There is no empty middle seats. It is a pain. The seats have gotten a little bit skinnier. Our bodies haven't gotten any skinnier. So, there is sort of a witch's brew that's out there in light of Halloween. Just don't give in to that witch's brew.
We have a question from a customer. This is from Carrie in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And this is pretty interesting. She says, "Hi, I'm looking to get a dirt cheap trip to Cancun." Aren't we all, Carrie?
It's funny, Ann, you say dirt cheap. I actually look at keywords sometimes and what people type in. They type in really, really, really dirt cheap airfare into Google. It always amuses me what people type into Google.
Well, she wants a dirt cheap, not just a dirt cheap trip to Cancun. She wants to travel anytime between now and February. And she's heard of nice all-inclusive resorts in Cancun, and she simply needs a getaway. She says, "Can you recommend anything for all-inclusive cheap destination to Cancun?"
Well, there's several different ones in Cancun, and really the surrounding areas, they have some all-ins. That is not my area of expertise, the actual all-in ones. I'm not a huge fan of the all-in and all-you-can-eat because I end up overindulging, and that includes cruises, by the way. But I can get you there cheap, Anne. And the thing to do going to Cancun, look, I mean, the good news is that Carrie has apparently complete flexibility, right? So that's
sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, so clearly you want to avoid the last 2 weeks in December and the first week in January. That's going to be caught up in the most expensive tickets down into Cancun. You're going to be looking at, did you say she's in Tennessee? So let's assume that she'll be flying somewhere out of an airport in Tennessee. Then those tickets are going to be the most expensive, probably out of the Tennessee area, whether it's Nashville or one of the other cities around, are going to be around $800 to $900 during that time frame. So avoid that. So what I'd be looking at, and also you want to avoid President's Day weekend, which is in mid-February. So when not to fly, that's perfect. So the last 3 weeks in January, typically the third week and fourth week and the first week in February are the three cheapest weeks to fly into Cancun.
Okay.
So that's when she wants to be shopping. I don't know if she actually if actually which airport she's in. You have a chance at some ultra low cost airlines. Spirit flies into Cancun. So I'm not positive what airport she's at, so you may or may not have Spirit as a choice. Just be aware there's a lot of fees involved there. If you don't understand them, make sure you know before you get on the flight. You'll also look at low-cost airlines like Southwest Airlines flying through Houston will fly into Cancun. That's something new. Well, they used to do it as part of their acquisition of AirTran, but essentially through their brand spanking new terminal down there in Houston. So you can do that as well. And then the Legacy Airlines also. So you could expect to pay a price somewhere out of that region. Now, if you were out of a hub airport like Chicago or something, it would be in the $300 range. Out of the airports in Tennessee, you're looking at sort of the low 400s, and that's usually a pretty good deal. Now, I don't consider that to be dirt cheap, but that's a pretty good deal. So you probably can find dirt cheap on Spirit if you have a connecting flight on Spirit, but typically that'll actually connect through South Florida, for example. So that may be a little bit longer flight, and certainly going to be a 1 or 2 stop.
One thing I was thinking of is some of these airlines like JetBlue and there's a number of them, partner with hotels and do offer certain deals. You might want to look them out, but you might find something just as good on your own. But one of the big Caribbean, the official tourism website for the Caribbean is CaribbeanTravel.com. And lots of times those tourism sites have a bunch of deals for, accommodations and eating and dining, blah, blah, blah. So you might.
Yeah, I mean, all-inclusives is not my, and that's why I'm not as up on all-inclusives, because it's just not my cup of tea. I've tried them, I'm not a young camper anymore, and I've tried them a few times, just not my cup of tea. But for many people, they love them. My next door neighbor, that's all they do. Yeah. And the Cancun area has lots of different options for those things. You have a variety of places you can go, out of the Cancun area. You also have Cozumel that's not too far away as well, a little ferry ride there as well that you can go to. And there's, I know, I don't know the names off the top of my head, but there's at least 10 to 12 very popular ones down there that you can pick from. And if you go during those last 2 weeks in January and early February, you'll be able to find a decent deal on those in many cases. And by the way, I would add in that category cruising as well. You can actually cruise that part of the world, stop in Cancun. Essentially, a cruise is all you can, all inclusive as well. So that's another option for you as well.
And thank you, Carrie, for your question. And if anybody else has a question for Rick, please send it to customer.service@faircompare.com. And now let's look at our Adventurist event of the week.
Yeah, I was looking at that because it's been such a hot topic on travel to Cuba. Airlines, basically in the last month and a half or so, actually announced their flights into Havana. They originally announced all their flights earlier in the year to places outside of Havana. But this is definitely an interesting. I was looking at some of the pictures. It reminds me a little bit of New Orleans, a little bit. If you actually look at some of the photos.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the Jazz Festival in Cuba. It's in mid-December, so 12/15 to 12/18. Usually, by the way, a fairly good time to fly, and probably one of those things where maybe you have 3 or 4 years before it gets overly commercial in Cuba. So it might be a time to actually check that out.
That's a very good thought before it gets overrun. One thing is I just posted deals from JetBlue to Havana starting at $54 one way, and to some of the other towns in Cuba as well. But those prices hit me immediately. However, Southwest has been having an ongoing sale on Cuba, and
they just announced their flights recently too. Yeah,
there's a whole bunch that are having sales to Cuba, so you might check it out. If you please check out our deals blog, but the easiest thing is just to go to faircompare.com and put in where you want to go, and we'll sort it out for you.
Yeah, and don't forget to download the Adventurist app. Just simple faircompare.com/app. If you're in a browser, you can get that off the Google Play Store, or you can also get that off of the App Store on iTunes.
Thanks, Rick.